vandana he Sharanagata kinkara betamane Guru Deva Dayakara Dina Jane
Ajnana Gyanajana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Manifesting as the mother of all wisdom, secular and spiritual, you dispel the illusion of ignorance and grant the precious boon of subtle insight. Your powerful presence has opened my inner eye of wisdom. Reverent salutations unto thee. Om peace, peace, peace. Om utkramantam stitam vapi munjanam vagunanvitam vimuda na nupashanti Jnana Chakshushaha. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. The deluded see him not, who departs, stays, and enjoys. Him being conjoined with the three gunas at that time. But they see, who possess the inner eye of wisdom, the Jnana Chakshu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. This Sunday, we welcome you to our big island of Hawaii, where we're having our third class in a series on that's titled after the sixth chakra, 2 slokas which I just chanted from the Guru Stotram and the Bhagavad Gita about this third eye, which last week we looked at as having been labeled and noted in 7 different religious traditions of the world. So it must be a very important point, or important port, if you want to call it that, a port of knowledge there that divine beings have concentrated on from time out of mind. And they say in the Kundalini Yoga system, where great beings enter into relativity and take on a body, and when they cast off the body, they depart out of that center too, that Ajna Chakra it's called in Kundalini Yoga. So it's interesting teachings that you get right away on the Kundalini system. We were calling it in the first class 2 weeks ago, some kind of esoteric wisdom that I would say in the 60s got a little treatment in the West, but not by beings who are really Kundalini Yoga masters, but more kind of opportunist kind of beings coming from India, and in other religions too. There are those kinds of beings, that ilk or run of lower grade teachers with lower grade mantras and lower intentions. But the great Kundalini teacher, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, whose teachings we'll look at some this week and next week in context with the traditional Kundalini Yoga system, have mentioned such wisdom, and just to hear about it gives it a different dimension. I mean, you could have in the 60s seen a third eye on a picture of a goddess or Lord Shiva, or back then you might have had a black light poster of it in your apartment or room when you were going to college or things like that, and people would come in and say, "Ooh, yeah, I know about that. That's the third eye," and probably that's all they could say about it. But if you check in to the traditions, which you should, basically yoga, in this case particularly Kundalini Yoga, because Kundalini is that force of powerful inner intelligence or inherent wisdom, if you like to use the term, that rises up these centers, which are not in the body, but which are allocated to levels of the body so that we can go inward. We don't want to end up with just thinking that there's an actual third eye that appears on somebody's head, in their forehead region. And between the brows, there's a vortex or a spiritual center that's inward going. And you, of course, in Sri Ramakrishna's words, you lose consciousness of the world when you enter in there. So, of course, then you'd lose consciousness of the body, too. That is, the physical body. But you'd have a deeper connection with the subtle body, what India calls the second world. The subtle body means Sukshma Sharira. They even had a title for it. And then, of course, there's the Karana Sharira, which is even deeper, a place of formlessness, which you would also enter into if your consciousness was raised to a higher level. Kundalini system and its 6 chakras, which we'll look at in a minute just to refresh our minds, is a kind of measure of where consciousness is in any given day or lifetime or age. And that's a measure not only for the individual but for the collective mind too. We could say, like today in this day and age in the materialistic West, or maybe even the whole world, which is materialistically oriented, that maybe the collective consciousness is at the 3 lower chakras only. What Sri Ramakrishna in the 1800s in Bengal, when he saw the Hindu people, said most people of the day were just at the levels of eating, drinking, and sex life, procreation, and weren't thinking of anything very much higher than that, or deeper would be a better term. So we hear something like that, these chants that I chanted, that though they know who have the inner eye of wisdom, that is, they see the Lord everywhere. Others, even though he departs, he enjoys, and he leaves different bodies, like Krishna says in the Gita, bees taking honey from different flowers, but nobody sees that. They just see the honey at the end, hopefully, or the flowers in the beginning and the bees, and they get the idea of what's going on, but nobody actually sees the Lord in all of that. We were talking about a teaching of heaven and how beings in heaven, which would probably be a third chakra kind of thing, according to India, ancestors, where your ancestors went if they were good people, are enjoying heaven, and all of a sudden they find themselves in the body, physical body again. And that's because their karmas from their last lifetime were not neutralized when they went to heaven. So good people have good karmas. Good karmas are a kind of gold chain, and that chain will bind you back into habitual, conventional life that you enjoyed before you went to heaven. If you had opened the consciousness as a measure to the heart or throat or third eye, that is the Anahata, the Vishuddha, and the Ajna Chakras, then you wouldn't be returning to earth against your own will. Only souls who had mastered those centers of inward moving consciousness, when Kundalini came to them due to their practices, they would have transcended heaven. So the heaven-aspiring senses, according to the Upanishads, are to be transcended if you want liberation. So there are people then who are caught in the loop of samsara, which has a tendency to restrict beings to salvation alone, and then loss of salvation, and seeking salvation again and gaining it. So coming back and forth in the first 3 chakras, you can see why Sri Ramakrishna has said eating, drinking, and sex life are the main preoccupation of people who are caught in that Kala Chakra. If you want to use the saying in Shaivism by Lord Shiva, the Kala Chakra. And Lord Buddha too used a term similar to that. So to get into the Dharmic wheel and off this other chakra, two different wheels there. And so you might be called out of heaven and find yourself in the body again, caught between the two poles of making a living and enjoy and thinking of heaven as your goal. But you never think about God in between those two poles. That is, your whole lifetime you're thinking about making a living and going to heaven, but you're not doing any sadhana. Sadhana is practice while you're on earth. That is, you think of God while you're on earth, and that will break the chain or snap the chain of rebirth. And then you won't be restricted to heaven and have to come back to earth. You'll transcend heaven and move to the Heart Chakra, and then to the Throat Chakra, and to the third eye, or Jnana Chakshu, as I was just chanting out of the Guru Stotram. Jnana Shakti Samarudas Tattvamala Vibhushitaha Bhukti Mukti Pradatacha. You get everything by opening this inner eye of wisdom. And this is a teaching of praise, an offering to the Guru. It's called the Guru Stotram. And so there are at least 2 slokas inside of that stotram that mention specifically the third eye, or the Jnana Chakshu. Chakshu means eye, Jnana means wisdom. So it's an eye of wisdom. And that's the title of our 4-part series. We're in the 3rd class right now to reorient you. And I think right now we're some months into what they're calling the coronavirus. And so people are staying home. So I hope they're taking the opportunity of staying home to tune into classes like this, which maybe their busy lives didn't allow for earlier, and now they have no excuse but to have to sit and listen maybe to 3 hours of teachings on this measure of where one's consciousness sits from lifetime to lifetime. If you can keep your consciousness high, if you can, to use another statement, if you can be mindful, like the Buddhists are talking about, if you can live a dharmic life, like the Hindus are talking about, if you can be pious and moral, like the Christians are talking about, in the truest sense of all those terms, then you will be thinking about the Lord and Mother of the Universe, or, if you're so inclined, the formless light of reality, because God with form will persist as far as probably the Throat Chakra, because you're still talking about to people on the qualified non-dualistic level. Vishuddha Advaita, they call that. But as soon as you reach this third eye, things begin to go away. Everything goes away except the thing. All of that goes away except capital T, that. You see, Tat. And that's a formless reality. So I pause there just to inject that into this stream of early preamble that I get into before I take you into the subject deeper, to point out that these centers of consciousness are a great measure, and the very thing I started out with at this class was these chants, and they point to a third eye from which consciousness enters and leaves the body. So if that's true, we're to think that ordinary peoples, they leave and exit lower centers. And so their consciousness is not very elevated. They get stuck in the 3 lower centers of eating, drinking, and sex life. That's called mundane human convention, or ignorance, or avidya. They're samsara, maya. There are different ways of the Kala Chakra, the wheel of rebirth and reincarnation. Those people who seek freedom, all of a sudden, they will want to try and open this 4th chakra. And last week I showed you that chart with the Vishnu Granthi, where it's kind of an elastic band between the 3rd and 4th centers of consciousness inside it, deep inside of you, that the ancestors can't get beyond because they've been thinking too much about the world, thinking too much about riches, thinking too much about food, thinking too much about domination, which is a real blight on present-day world, wars and coveting over other people, coveting other people's goods and so forth, resources, and not thinking there in all of that about divine reality. So those who think about divine reality, even here in this very lifetime, as the chants in the Upanishads say, they can penetrate through this granti. And that's segues me nice into the second chart I want to show you today about grantis, or knots. I promised you to take you through that last week. Knots where? In your subtle nervous system. Now, knots in your gross nervous system would cause diseases, like this coronavirus that's out there, you see. If you have a good immune system and you're healthy and your mind uses the fire of yoga to keep yourself healthy, you have a good mindset about it, you're not fearful of getting sick and so forth, then you probably can maintain yourself perfectly even in the midst of the worst plague or illnesses that are coming your way. I know personally the Ramakrishna order in India sends dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of monks to these places where landslides and plagues and floods, monsoons ravage India year to year. And these monks go and serve selflessly. There's no idea of getting paid or anything like that. They just go and help people, bring water filters to drought-infested areas or where water's been polluted, and cloths and clothes where there's people dying of cold, and medicines and so forth where there's illness. And they work with this high-minded ideal, and a lot of them don't get sick. And those that do wear themselves out, they go back to the monastery, recover, and then you'll often see them going back again to help these poor people that are caught in these infested areas. So, you know, something like a catastrophe that we're going through right now with the coronavirus happens probably every year in India, and in different forms. So I think one of the teachings that we're seeing right now is a kind of media-based fear that's going on. The flapping of gums and the wagging of tongues amongst the media. And it's probably not very helpful at all. It's causing more people to be fearful than just to be careful. And so I heard a story today that was from our Vedantic tradition about the Goddess of Cholera. See, so she visited a village once, and a man was walking, and he was entering that village, and the Goddess of Cholera was exiting the village, you see. And so he stopped and said, "Oh, please save me from cholera, O Goddess of Cholera." And then he asked her, you know, "How many souls did you take in that village?" And she said, "Well, about 10. And they died of cholera, but 50 others died of fear of cholera." So that's kind of a teaching for today's day and time, that fear can weaken your immune system. You have an immune system in your mind as well as in your body. So if you know about these higher chakras, heart and throat particularly, you can build your consciousness on the immune system that's inherent in those centers. And we'll look at that too in the case of some poisons and some nectars that are caught or inherent to these different centers of consciousness as consciousness falls into them or raises out of them, as the case may be. So it's very practical then, these spiritual systems, that you use them to keep your mind in a fit and fettle condition. High-minded, noble-minded. That will be your best defense against anything that is going on at the 3 lower chakras, which when you're in a body, you're going to have to come up against in some form or another, like going to work or raising children or teaching at a school. I have various students who write to me about questions of how to deal with work and all of this, and particularly at a time like this now when the extra weight of this virus is upon us. So I don't want to, again, flap my gums or wag my tongue too much about this or incite any fear. My message then is that you become fearless, because before the virus or any catastrophe visits you and after it goes away, you're still, Brahman is still there. Divine reality was never affected by it. Ishvara, your chosen ideal, is still there. It was never affected by this catastrophe. Your Ishtam, your chosen ideal, Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Sharda, Swami Vivekananda, which is the ideal of this ashram, is still there unaffected by that virus. Guess what? Vedanta as a philosophy and the teachings of the Dharma are still there unaffected by the catastrophe. And so you should still be there, steady. If you contract a disease, let it run its course and recover, and you'll develop a tolerance to it. See, you'll be able to transcend it next time it comes around, or any other form of it comes around, or you can live in abject fear, your choice. See? So this is not just a high esoteric teaching, then it has very practical elements to it and application that you must use in your Vedantic practice. See? It comes down to practice, because again, heaven and earth going back and forth. When you're on earth, you didn't practice thinking about God, so when you went back to heaven, you just went to the third chakra, and you still have karmas for going back to earth. It's when you practice sadhana here on earth that you do away with these barriers, snapping the chains of relative existence, the chains of rebirth. That's a goal that you set for yourself. The Upanishads and the Akshi Upanishad, if you've been watching those teachings in Portland, Oregon, that I've been giving 4 times a year. I hope I can be there in May again if these sanctions lift and so forth and we can move about again. That Upanishad talks about one of the very first directives of the 7 doorways to yoga is to overcome rebirth. That's where it starts out. You have other systems that are talking about how to get to, free of alcohol, or how to go to a psychiatrist and work on yourself and self-improve yourself, or pump iron and get your body strong. Everything that starts kind of low and doesn't ever end up very high. But in Kundalini and in the Upanishadic lore, you're supposed to start with getting rid of the chain of rebirth. You snap it. That means in here, because it's happening in here. So you say, I'm done with it. I will never come back to this body and this earth again in ignorance. It is your mantra. It's your credo. It's your motto, if you wish. And until you overcome that, you can't really be very effective at teachings that occur at a higher level. You'll entertain them, but you'll still be plagued by the fear of rebirth, like people going from heaven to earth to hell and back again. So here's a measure for you, you see, that the 7 chakras of ancient India gave you a long time ago, that started off at a high level, or started off at the fundamental problem of things. It didn't take you lifetimes or books and lots of study to get to the very first lower level in order to get to the higher level later. They're cutting here. See, as the mother has a sword, she cuts here. She cuts out the head of ignorance and starts you off on the path on the right footing. Lord Buddha called that right orientation. Samyak darshana, proper seeing. And if that eye be single, you shall know the truth. If it has a sliver of wood in it, or a mote of dust, it does not see well. So you have to get rid of those overlays that, if thine eye offend you, pluck it out kind of teaching, you see, which is used more on a moral level, of course, but it's also very applicable to the fact that, if my eyes are still impure and they're seeing things that aren't helping me, I should try and develop this inner eye of wisdom. And my guru is going to help me do that. See? I have a teacher for that, just like you have a teacher for medicine, and you had a teacher in college for mathematics, and you had a teacher in college for music and so forth. Spirituality has a teacher for you too that you need to go to and master that system for. And guess what? It's the best and highest of all systems, because then you can pretty much choose your next lifetime and not have it foisted upon you by either negative actions you did in a past lifetime, or a society that's uninformed, or parents that are still ignorant of the Dharma, which is a great problem right now we're facing. So in this way I give you this introduction to our third class, in which we'll look at some knots in consciousness that have been there for lifetimes. They're called granthi, 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 and they're in the nadis. Remember the teaching in the last 2 weeks, nadis are nerve currents. You have a lot in the body. If I were to sleep on my side, like I did the other night, and wake up with my hand numb, you see. I wake up and I rub it, right, and get the circulation back. Well, you had a crimp there in your shoulder from a wrong position, and you have to exercise it and get the blood flowing and so forth, the feeling back. It's just much like that in your subtle body. This is in your gross body, and if you're atrophied too long, you won't be able to bring it back. You'll have to resort to some elixir or some medicine or some doctor or some chiropractor or some form of healing on the physical level to bring that sensitivity back. Same too in the subtle body. If you've been without the Dharma for several lifetimes, like we're probably to think America has been, how many lifetimes could you have had since the Boston Tea Party, you see? Should have kept with tea and not gone to coffee, in my opinion, but how many lifetimes would you have had, you see? 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how much you lived. So you probably didn't have the Dharma until 1893, when Swami Vivekananda came to the World's Fair, first World's Fair, and started to give it out to you. And we saw that movie recently about Edison, Westinghouse, and Nikola Tesla. And how Hollywood portrayed that. I kept looking at that movie thinking, gee, I wish I could see a person in orange walk through that crowd. Because Swamiji was there in 1893 for that World's Fair. And it's just kind of obvious that we didn't see the truth again. The great avatar, the great being was amongst us, and we were fascinated with electricity or with money we could get from electricity, which Edison and Eisenhower and Nikola Tesla all were. Or we were fascinated with all the scenes that are going on in the World's Fair, all the culture, you see, which is actually not so negative, having these cultures come together and share. So, but the real positive thing went over our heads again. And it took us time then, to get back to the point, to open nadis in the subtle body to appreciate Swami Vivekananda had been there. That's what you're doing. To quote one story about one man walking through Chicago and seeing a poster of a Hindu monk giving a talk there. I think it was in Chicago or New York. So he was there on the scene, he was giving a talk, this man saw the poster, it spoke to something inside of him. He was fascinated by seeing that monk in orange, in ochre cloth. So he went to the talk and became a follower of the Vedanta. So that's knowing after, yes, but it's also based on something that's an impression in your mind. If you didn't have that impression in your mind, like thousands of other people who walked by and saw that poster, you wouldn't have responded to it. So there was something in your mind from a past lifetime that caused you to be fascinated, attracted, and to follow. Basically, those are 3 different levels. Fascination is moha in our tradition. It means, fascination with things worldly. And attraction means, good, you got attracted, but you also are averse later. But following, that's a whole different matter. You see, I came, I saw, I conquered. Means that when Swamiji got up on the podium in 1893, afterwards, when he went on his tour and spoke about Kundalini Yoga, something in you responded, and you were born again later in the hippie period in 1960, and all of a sudden you had this attraction to Kundalini Yoga, so you had gotten it from a previous lifetime. When he had talked about it, you might have even been there in the audience. So this planting of seeds goes on in different levels, and we can't just leave it all to the physical in the hands of words I don't particularly like. Luck, randomness, chaos, good fortune. See, these words don't appeal to a Vedantist. They're leaving it in the hands of some sort of coincidence, is another word I don't like. So what about predestination, karma, and then enlightenment. How about third eye or Jnana Chakshu? When you hear about that and all of a sudden go, wow, I felt something there. I remember when I was a teenager, a light went off in my head. I never knew what happened. You don't know how many people have told me that in my 30 or 40 years of sharing this teachings with all of you from India. Yeah, I had experiences. So I'll steer them to the Upanishad, where it says in the Upanishad, you'll hear lights, you'll hear bells, you'll hear the sound of a flute, the sound of a kettle drum, you'll hear the sound of Om start coming. Right there in the slokas of the Upanishads, they're mentioning what happens when consciousness probably temporarily begins to rise. It's called Udgata in our tradition. It's not Kundalini yet. A lot of people mistake it for her. But it's a precursor of what's to come. I like to talk about in terms of if there was a microphone here and I tested it, said test 1, 2, 3, that's Udgata. She is coming up based on some opening you had in these subtle nerves in your mind. You opened to this wisdom that you heard spoken by someone at some lifetime. And she says, that's it, I'm coming. You see, here I come. She'll be coming around the mountain, but she's actually coming over the mountain of ignorance, to you, you see. And you're going to feel her rise, Kundalini power rise in you. You'll be healthier. Forget the coronavirus. It can never get you. She's got you, you see. And you should go with that and be impervious to all diseases, physical, vital, mental, intellectual, psychological, philosophical, and spiritual. There are some problems in spirituality too that recur, according to the father of yoga. So a further extension to my preamble here, but I want you to know that Kundalini is based on having to know these few words. There are passageways inside of you going inward. You use them to dream tonight, to leave waking and going to dream. You use them later to leave your body and go to heaven, or leave your body and go to deeper places, like the Heart Chakra. So you need to know the word nadi if you're a yogi, or an aspiring yogi or yogini. And then you'll probably need to know, well, I opened a nadi but it closed again. Oh, that's because of a granthi, you see. So a little basic Sanskrit knowledge of even 2 words will open up the Kundalini Yoga system to you for exploration. You might want to add then after that chakra and Jnana Chakshu and others, you see. So every system in India, Vedanta, Yoga, Samkhya, Buddhism, Jainism, Shaktism, Shaivism, Vaishnavism, all of them have their own language for this Divine Mother power inside of you. The overall word there would be Shakti, or better yet, Mahashakti, and Prana. So these are some words you have to probably know and define. And right now, today, of those of you who are just being reminded of these 2 words, or those of you who are hearing them for the first time, they are nadis and granthis. So let's look into this then, so that with the wisdom that is being granted to us by the Divine Mother of the Universe, we can see if we're ready to awaken and hold this energy at a certain center. And it would be beyond the 3 centers is where we'd want to hold it. Probably right there at the heart is a good place. If you meditate on the third eye too quickly, it can be very disorienting, as the chart will tell us. Disoriented. So you could get imbalanced, and like I said, there are books written in the 60s about Kundalini by some kooky people who were having really weird, torturous samadhis that we never saw Sri Ram Krishna go through. His Kundalini came up marvelously, flowed smoothly, and he exhibited all these samadhis from his mid-30s on, till he passed from the body at 50 or so years old. So this should be a natural, spontaneous uprising of Kundalini power through powerful nerve flows, currents that are in the first chart here that we'll see, called Pingala, Sushumna, and Ida. So let's look at this chart first. It's called Inward Ascension of the Free Soul. So imagine your soul that had gotten illumined by opening your third eye, and you came into the body with this still open. See? And then you grew up and you kept hearing the sound of Om. And you kept seeing clouds part and a cylinder right there in your third eye, whether your eyes were open or closed. And this happened to you once a year, once every 5 years. You see, very rare that she makes an appearance like that. So you probably can measure at that point that, I must have, my Kundalini must have risen and touched the heart before, and maybe even the throat. If I want to speak and hear about nothing but God, then my consciousness is here. Sri Ramakrishna said, she sits in my throat. Who? Goddess Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom. And she pushes forth wisdom from there. And I do nothing. I just open my mouth and speak. So there's an indication of somebody who had, at least, opened that Vishuddha Chakra. Vishuddha Chakra, you see, who is endowed with peace and felicity of mind. So the Vishuddha Chakra is the throat chakra. Vishuddha actually means exceedingly pure. Purer than the pure. Not just Shuddha, but Vishuddha. So this is a person whose innate purity opened these three channels so that Mother Kundalini could rise in them and camp out. Pitch tent right here in his throat. And then shove out wisdom to us without end. And he said occasionally I would drop to the Heart Chakra because there I could see the devotees. He said the Heart Chakra for me was like the drawing room of the Lord, or the drawing room of a rich person, you see, who likes to hang out mostly in his study, you see, smoking his pipe and so forth. He's using funny stories for us. And he said, here I can see the devotees, so he's talking about God with form. But then he said I'd run a boat race, this chakra would open, and I couldn't do anything but think and speak about the Lord. When I heard people speak about worldly matters, it would hurt my ears when my consciousness is at the center. So I would go away from the company of human beings if they didn't want to hear or speak about divine reality. Then sometimes Ma Kundalini would go to the third eye, you see, to the Jnana Chakshu, and all form would pass away, and he'd have visions, these powerful visions, probably beyond the gods, visions not just of gods and goddesses, Indra's realm, which is more like heart kind of level, but at a level where the two eyes have been made single. So all of this is kind of an introduction to this chart. Here's what happens when the soul reaches such a high level, according to Trishanka. He says, I am the stimulator of the tree of the universe. My fame is high, like a mountaintop. Elevated to the most holy, I am the excellent immortal being, as he is in the sun. I am the power, the wealth, refulgent with divine intuition. I am imperishable and immutable. I have become. That is, I have become imperishable and immutable. So changeless and incomparable is this great soul who has become noble. Arya, Buddha called it. Non-harming, like Krishna says in the Gita, that one who does not harm or afflict the world and whom the world cannot afflict, that person rises to this high level, this high chakra. Chakra means, or lotus, means a spiritual center or vortex, but it's within you. I said yesterday if you were in a helicopter hovering over New York City, you'd see a kind of physical representation of a chakra, and all the roads are nadis, leading into the city, and a huge amount of souls are gathering there. It's the same inside. Souls without bodies, or with subtle bodies, are gathering in these vortexes by the millions. and sporting there in consciousness. It's a nice way of thinking about it. Sporting in consciousness. Even here in the third chakra, there's a big party going on, Sri Krishna said, you see, with your ancestors. Problem is, it doesn't last very long. You get pulled out of it, back to the body. So a marvelous system is this Kundalini Yoga teaching. I showed you a week before last, was it, or last week, 7 different systems in 7 different philosophies. Many-tiered like this. And here's one of them, the Kundalini Yoga's precious chakra system. Very Vedic and very tantric. It's a heady and healthy mixture of Vedanta and tantric darshanas. Well, this is a quick study. I'm just showing you to reorient you so that we can look into some of the knots that keep people from being themselves. Doesn't he say here, I have become, you see. I have become what? Imperishable and immutable. So his nadis are all open. His consciousness can go anywhere. And it can pass from waking, dreaming, and deep sleep without inhibitions, without grantis closing. Like if you want a metaphor, we've used it before, you open up a trail with a machete here in Hawaii up into the forest through the bamboo and so forth. And you say, oh, now I can pass. So you go home and a year passes. You see, oh, what about that trail I blazed a year ago? I think I'll go up there and see. You go up there and it's like practically overgrown already. Get the machete out again. At least you can see where it once was. And that means you did that work once. It's like a samskara, isn't it? Oh, I've done this before. I mean, it's much deeper than deja vu, because you actually did the work of sadhana at one point, but you didn't keep it up. See, you have to keep blazing that trail here on earth to keep these nadis or these passageways open. It's basically, you can just look at it as thinking of God all the time. You're thinking of your occupation and you're thinking of heaven afterwards. And that binds you into a duality. Go ahead and do your occupation and think about heaven, but focus it in God. You see, do your sadhana. What's it mean? Chant the Lord's name, do your mantra, study the scriptures, the revealed scriptures, worship the Lord and the Mother of the universe with sacrifices and yagyas and pujas and ceremonies, and serve all beings as God. Karma yoga. If you do this fourfold yoga, then you're keeping up a strong sadhana all your life. And Kundalini is going to come up the central channel. You see, that's called the Sushumna, the arrow pointing to it. And the Pingala is going around one side from left to right, and the Ida is going around the other side from right to left. And so this is the 3 main, to put it poetically in the song in India, the 3 main rivers, holy rivers, leading to the highest pilgrimage point. Isn't that beautiful? 3 main holy rivers leading to the highest pilgrimage point, the highest refuge. So you don't want any blockages in these. Now, we say those are the 3 main nadis. So how many others are there? Well, let's see here. The hollow canal called Sushumna lies between the 2 arteries of the upper palate and the nipple-like growth that hangs down between them. It passes out of the crown where the root of the hair is made to part. That's the crown chakra, opening the skull in the center. This is the gate leading to the Supreme Lord. So from the 3rd eye, there's a higher location, a 7th chakra, if you will, called the Sahasrara, 1,000-petaled. Branches into a great lotus of 1,000 passageways, if you want. Infinite. That's why he says, I feel imperishable and I feel immutable, you see, because I've opened that. The crown, that eye of wisdom, like I sang. Jnana Chakshu samarudas tattvamala bibhushitaha bhukti mukti. I got mukti because I opened that 3rd eye of wisdom. The other quote here on this chart from the Taittiriya Upanishad says, there is within the heart the bright space known to all. There let the worshipper meditate upon and realize the intelligent, imperishable, self-effulgent soul. May you, o prachina yogya, worship in the matter described herein. So he wants you to practice this Kundalini Yoga according to the instructions of the preceptor and open these nadis and keep them open. Don't let granthis form in them. If we want to look at the individual, he can do that. He, she can do that, right? They can become a yogi or a yogini, even here on this world, in this very life. But the collective consciousness is going to have a very hard time doing that. There are so many kinds of karmas, so many kinds of beings at so many different levels of consciousness, or lack thereof, that it's going to be very difficult to raise even 100,000 of them out of darkness, like an avatar does, you see. Now we have, since Sri Ramakrishna was here, 5 million followers of him. He was the greatest master of Kundalini Yoga that we have ever heard of, really, but definitely in this age, which is the Kali Yuga, a kind of dark age, where consciousness is being supplanted, you see, by science and covered over by mundane preoccupations, pleasure of the senses, objects, materialism, and so forth. We've just taken and put away Brahman in the back and put all these things in front. And the highest goal there, as I say, is seeking heaven. So, after this life, I'll go to heaven. So you're caught in this 3 lower chakra. See, here's these chakras here. Now, how do I, in the body, how do I escape such problems? So you see, you make your body the ether, you make your sport the prana, the life force, and you make your mind felicitous, and you get yourself endowed with peace and realize the truth. So these 7 chakras then are potentially divine, inherently divine, so that beings who visit them will find Brahman or Kundalini Shakti available to them wherever they look. Remember I sang in the first week, Jo Kuchahai, Tuhui Hai, Dilke Lagaya, you know, this beautiful song. It's just, which is a combination of Hindu and Muslim kind of hybrid that's very beautiful. Tujase Hamne Dilko Lagaya, they sing. See, so everywhere I go, I find only you, O Lord, or only you, O Goddess, at all the centers. So this is the goddess's tree. It's her realms. You sort of speak the unspeakable there, because everyone's talking about God this, or man that, and Brahman that, and male this, but the mother, nobody's speaking about her. So now you find a system that's birthed, authored, operated, and culminated by the Divine Mother herself. Who wouldn't want to be attracted to that? So there's this deep bliss that comes when she begins to rise at any center. She'll purify any center, any atmosphere, if you sing her songs. That one who listens to these beautiful songs on Kali will purify any atmosphere they're in. So they'll walk around in bliss of Divine Mother Kundalini, already having risen in them, and she'll show them more wonders as the practice goes on. See? More nadis will open, less granthis. You know, knots will be rent asunder, and consciousness will flow freely. It'll be transported. So those 3 quotes are there, and a quick look at the 7 chakras there, and the 3 main nadis here. It's a very simple chart, but it's very to the point about what we're talking about here in the Kundalini Yoga system. Let's move right on and look at the problem that we face when we try and awaken Mother Kundalini. She's not easily bribed. This one, another song in India says, she won't accept sacrifice of goats and cows and buffaloes. You know, it's very hard to to get her love, her pure love. She'll give some wisdom, she'll give some love. Very hard to get her grace. If she looks at you for a second, then you're awakened. If she gazes at you for a minute, then you get illumined. But if she looks at you and makes you her own, you see, then you're her. O meditator, become the goddess. You are her essence. Beautiful song in India. You can see how they're thinking, right? O meditator, become the goddess. You don't just meditate on the goddess. You think, she's taken me over. Who does it sound like? Shri Rama Krishna Paramahamsa. Paramaguru Shri Rama Krishna. Laho Pranam. Avatara, Matri Avatar, you see. Namaskar, Namaskar. So it sounds like this great soul who had been completely taken over by Mother Kundalini. You need to study him. And he was here recently. He was a great steamship whose waves are still coming off his passing. The surfers are out there, you see on those waves. Those are the intrepid souls. So let's look then at, more specifically, at some of the things that keep us from realizing her within us so that we can become the goddess. It's not enough just to think, she's my essence. That's good. That's a good affirmation. But you're going to have to please her in ways that are unconventional. She doesn't accept cheap bribes, as the song says. So she wants you to do some work to prepare for her coming. There's a teaching Sri Ramakrishna used to give. If a woman sees a spider crawl into her shoe, she won't put it on. Even if her husband takes the shoe out, gets rid of the spider, brings the shoe back, she'll still look at it suspiciously for days. I don't know. Could have crawled back in, you see. So he's talking about Mother Kundalini not being willing to go where your spiders are, you see, or have been. You have to open up these nadis, and then she'll say, okay, I guess I can go there, you see. And that's a great boon and blessing, even if she comes up to the level of your ancestors and lights the field for you, you see. Then you can start to light up your ancestors, you see. And that's the best way to please them, because we can say, well, you want to get beyond your ancestors, but how do you do that? Through Pitru Yagya. There are 5 yagyas you do to everything at the level of the 7 chakras. Well, the 7th maybe it's gone beyond, see. That as long as you're in the gross, subtle, and causal body, you're thinking about these 5 great yagyas. You do a yagya to the plants and animals, and you do a yagya to mankind, you do a yagya to your ancestors. Yagya means sacrifices, by the way. And you do yagya to the teachers, the rishis, rishi yagya. And you do a yagya to the gods and goddesses, the devas and the devis. So these are 5, how many? 5 different yagyas or sacrifices you do. Does that sound like you're disrespecting your ancestors? Or are you trying to please them, to get them in a position where you can convince them that they need to go beyond heaven, beyond the heaven-aspiring senses, to quote the Upanishads. In India, and with its Buddhism and its Jainism too, in India is the only place where you'll find these teachings, in such detail particularly. People stay away from the teaching of reincarnation. They don't know anything. They haven't known anything for hundreds, maybe thousands of years about it yet in other religions. India's been right at it. And that's why it developed so many systems. I showed you 7 of them last week in a chart. And this one is a particularly precious one, with the esoteric and rather mystical, attracting tone of it. Gee, I think I want to see what it happens to awaken myself to a higher chakra. You know, it's like, I invite you on the adventure of consciousness. See, please come, please come. So she's beckoning inside, but you're going to have to make way for her. So what are the things that are in the way? You see this chart that I'm showing now, up this side, your left-hand side, is this human form with an arrow. And the arrow going up, the red arrow, represents spiritual force moving upwards. That's 4 words that they have 1 word for in India, Kundalini. If you say Kundalini, she's coiled up at the bottom of the spine, and she wants to move up and out. Your whole birth was meant to convince her to move up. You're born for no other reason than that. And she may stay veiled to you if you're an intellectual, a professional, a scientist, a doctor, but she's still, she was still a part of your process of giving you the knowledge of being a doctor, the knowledge of being a lawyer, the knowledge of being a mathematician, the knowledge of being a musician. She was involved in all that, you just didn't see her yet. Not until this chakra at the heart opens. So whether you know it or not, your whole birth is based upon getting that spiritual force to move upwards. Pardon me here, upward means inwards. Please don't start to look up and, like God is somewhere up there in a cloud. That's superstition. The Lord is within you. Kingdom of Heaven's also within you. These chakras also within you. It's all about going inside. So if you want to open up your consciousness past the 3rd chakra, where have your ancestors gone? Within. Where did they come from? Within. You see? Where did you come from? Within. Where are you going? Within. I mean, when you talk about physical and bodies and everything, that's why India has always been so looked down the nose at that. There's really no such thing as external. They're looking at the external, calling it within. And science began to do that when it began to puzzle out what the object was made of, particles. It began to get a clue that it didn't take very seriously among the massive sciences, that there was something subtle in the object. And particles were there. But long, long ago, even further, long before Buddhism, even before Jainism, which was 12 generations before Buddha lived, they were thinking about inward. See? They weren't mummifying their kings and queens in a pyramid for an afterlife. They were thinking, there is no afterlife, there's just Brahman. See? Both afterlife and before life are dualities. I can't prepare my body for that. I got to prepare my subtle body for that, because my physical body was created by my subtle body. You create your own bodies. Your parents just provide the gateway, and nature just provides the elements. That's all. You take these two and you prepare your own physical body from life to life. And you either do it ignorantly and don't know after, or you do it consciously, like the seers do, the yogis do, and you know before and after. So, then you're going to have to, let's say, imagine for now, a network of nerves inside your mind. Please don't go to your brain and don't look up, as I was saying. Go into your mind, because that's the kingdom of heaven within you. And as many thoughts as you have every day, they're running along as many channels, nadis or nerves, that are in your mind. And they're not exhausting even a small amount of them. You can think this way and that way. You can be an Edison or a Nikola Tesla. You can be a Swami Vivekananda. And there are different degrees of nadis that are opened up in that mind, of which that soul can travel along, either more or less restricted. You know Sri Ramakrishna's story of the pole planted in the middle of the ground, and the calf is tied to it with a tether. So that calf can only go so far around in circles. It can explore all the area up to the pole, but if it tries to go outside that restricted area, it's got the noose there, the tether, you see. So that's a restricted man's channel. It doesn't have a lot of nadis to go to or through, you see. He says, well, I think I'll go back to the pole now. Okay, I'm at the pole now. Well, I think I'll go out to as far as I can go. He's got basically 2 directions, you see. 2 nadis are opened up. 2 chakras maybe. But a Swami Vivekananda or so like that has snapped that cord and can go and extend it or go outside of it and come back to it with facility, with flexibility, and without fear. And so all 7 chakras will be open to a soul like that. And if they pass away, then they know they can pass out of a certain chakra consciously. Time for me to go. I think I'll consult the almanac in India, which is actually auspicious time to depart. I'll find that. Then, okay, now you go meditate, leave me alone, come back, and he's gone. That's what happened in Vivekananda's last day. The last words he said to us was, go meditate, I'll join you soon. You see? Very symbolic. See? They came back and he was gone. See, he had decided, he had asked for the almanac a few days earlier. He was looking for an auspicious time to go, because when he went to the Icelingam in the Himalayas and went in and meditated overnight, Shiva came to him in the cave and said, and gave him the Mrityunjaya vrata, the boon. You see, you can leave the body anytime you want, Swamiji. It's up to you. So at 39, he chose when to leave, and which chakra to leave out of. When the doctor arrived, it was still warm. You see, it's like all the heat was up here, like he had, his consciousness had just at the time of leaving had just gone to the highest center and gone out. Well, actually, again, pardon me, gone in. Up and out just won't quite describe it, you see. It's a habit we have of speaking, but we have to really think of these things all being inward ascension of the free soul, inward ascension. So that's a nice phrase that I came up with, inward ascension. So back to the knots that keep you tied to this, as a calf to this pole, to the 3 lower chakras. Here's the definition about granthis that I put together. Granthis are complex knots congealing in one's body and energy, as well as in the emotional, mental, psychic, and spiritual bodies, impeding the easy flow of spiritual force, which otherwise keeps the aspiring human being strong and fit for the healthy for the purpose of living a dharmic life. So why would you allow these to form in this lifetime? Because you'll come back with them again in the next lifetime if you don't work them out in this lifetime. See? So what's the first thing, if you're yogically inclined, you would think about if you're 19, when I thought about it? I think I have to breathe. I think I have to breathe. And if you breathe, you'll open up nadis right away. You'll probably snap a lot of these granthis that are keeping you from living a good dharmic life in the body. So you have to breathe first. What's the second thing you might think? My food habits are horrible. See? I was raised eating meat up till I was 19, but this year I'm celebrating my 50th year of vegetarianism. So from 19 to 70, which I just turned in January, I've been vegetarian and completely concentrated on this Dharma and all its facets for 50 years of this lifetime. The first 19 was satisfying society and upbringing, you see, satisfying that karma. I was not, roped to a pole and pulling, you see, to get out. If you're strong enough, you can pull that pole right out of the ground. Pull the pole, pull the pole, pull the pole. See? Stretch that. And maybe pray to the mother and say, well, can you just at least extend my tether a little bit? She says, well, pull more and you can do that yourself. You see, it'll stretch. Make it elastic. See? So a lot of it has to do with strong willpower. So I'm saying here, the first things you think about are breathing and food, I think. And that's in the Kundalini system. We've taught it many times. There are YouTube classes on it you should go look at. And a couple beautiful charts we put together with this diagram of the chakras called food and prana, and the role of food and prana. So you want to get the prana moving, and you want to get it free of spikes. It can't be free of spikes if you don't breathe evenly and eat sattvic food. We call it prasad in our tradition. So I had to compose my own quote about granthis. See, that's what I've understood from a wide inspection of the word in the tradition, that there are knots in your emotional, mental, psychic, and spiritual bodies. I'd say in the West right now, the biggest knot is in the emotional body. We're far too sentimental. We're far too attracted to miracles and sensationalism. We're far too attracted to occult powers, like in our movies and our superheroes and all this kind of thing that's going on. We're far too attracted to sentimentalism around speaking animals and cartoons, you know, and all this kind of thing. So the emotional body has lots of knots in it. And if you want to think higher, you're going to have to bust those wide open. You're going to disallow them. You can't stop me. I'm going to breathe it away. I'm going to do my asanas to purify the body, and my breathing exercises, but I can't stop there, because that would be falling far short of the goal. See? So I'm just mentioning the emotional body here as one of the things. Now we'll save the quote by Shankara toward the end. But you can see here that that figure that I was starting to talk about with the arrow pointing up is this spiritual force moving upward. And you can see at the bottom, near the knees there, the word anagranthis. Then next, around the waist, pranagranthis. Then around the heart, hridaya granthis. And finally at the mind, mana granthis. You might as well start looking at the different levels of your being and find out what knots are there. We were speaking about that in our drive to the ashram this afternoon on the way over, about having to do the inner work. You can't just leave it to chance or randomness or coincidence or good luck, as I was saying earlier. You really have to do the work to make sure that you open these nadis in this lifetime, so that she will appear inside of you. She will rise in you. So with those kinds of granthis, just those four mentioned, in conjunction with the body, human body, let's look at what they entail, starting at the very problematic level of physical. So knots of the body, we're talking about circulatory interference, as I was already mentioning about atrophied arm. And it's like stepping on a hose and water not getting through. The physical spine has to be free of knots too. So there's some things you can do to help it get over this circulatory interference. Recurring disease is coming back. The problem about talking about the knots of the body is most of them are caused in the mind. So I want you to try and connect with me. Put off your conclusions about these knots in the body till you see where they originate from. Because otherwise, that I'm saying, people will stop at Hatha Yoga and at pranayama, probably not very well done either, and become sort of fixated with them before they know that all of these things, all diseases, for instance, come from the mind. Who taught that? Lord Vishuddha, and later Patanjali. The diseases all originate in the mind. I mean, can it be any clearer? Is there anything that can make that not clear? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? You see, he might as well have stepped up to the young Ram and said, do you understand the words coming out of my mouth? You see, the mind creates the body, not God. Nature can't do it alone. Otherwise, you would have been there, before the monkeys. Now you're playing back into the hands of Darwinism. So you've always been there as consciousness, see. And the physical play went on one level of things. But what about this other level? So don't get stuck in the body, I'm saying here. Recurring disease happens because it's in the mind. When I was talking earlier about the coronavirus, then I was saying, make sure that you don't believe in it. You don't take it for the highest truth. You offset it with the fire of yoga and with higher thinking, and keep your mental immune system strong. I love that teaching. People are talking about their physical immune system and what elixirs and pills and things they can take to make them better. I'd say eating good food would be the best thing. Some supplements okay, because nature is all farmed out nowadays, so you have to supplement, according to the health experts I've talked to. But I think the most important thing is your mental immune system. I've known and seen, even in my own life, beings who were unhealthy but realized. Illumined souls who didn't have healthy bodies for whatever reason, probably because of taking on the karmas of others. They said Sri Ramakrishna was actually not suited to do what Vivekananda did. So strong, Narendra, he could go out to America and, mix with the Americans and the Western society. Even he passed away at 39 years of age, but Sri Ramakrishna had to be careful of what he ate, and his digestion wasn't all that great. Holy Mother had to take care of him. But inside he was a spiritual dynamo of the highest and the most intense kind. In fact, that's probably why the body began to fall apart. There's a teaching he liked about that. It says when the elephant went and walked into Bharati's hut, you see. So there's this man who had a hut, and he left, and this elephant went and decided it wanted to go in. See? So it couldn't fit through the door. So it shook the hut down to its very foundations. So he came back and saw his hut completely fallen apart. Well, he's not talking about something that happened in some village somewhere that people talked about for a few weeks and forgot. He's talking about Kundalini rising in the hut of the body and how it shakes you to the very foundations, particularly if you still have knots in your granthis, in your nadis, before you try and awaken her. Well, this gets me started on a whole different trajectory of complaint in today's world, is that we're not qualifying ourselves and doing purificatory practices before we entertain such powerful ideas as Kundalini Yoga. We have eyes bigger than our stomachs, they say. We think we can jump to the highest step from the lowest without knowing what the steps in between are like. These are all teachings in the Vedanta and from Sri Ramakrishna, so he was mentioning these. These aren't just my pet peeve. So all of this to say, as we go through this, remember, it's an inward thing. So we're going to be tracing the body to the prana, and the prana to the heart, and the heart to the mind. So we're going inward. Heart here means emotional, by the way, not heart chakra. I'll clarify that right now. It's hard to talk about the heart in Vedanta because it really means the Atman. That is the heart of everything. That's heart with a capital H, but as far as let's not get stuck in terms, use kind of level of things. We can also use the English word heart for this lowercase heart, which means our emotional body. A good word to use for it. So the other thing is there are not failure of the bodily organs, constricting of the muscles, and premature decay. This starts happening to people in their 30s. Remember being in high school and seeing people who are perfectly healthy and seeing them later, 20 years later, and they were out of shape, overweight, drank too much beer or whatever, bad food, fast food and so forth, and their body was gone already, just after 3 decades of living. And a lot of those nadis had been blocked, but because those nadis had been blocked, their thinking was blocked. So here's a case of outward in. If you could start off with a healthy body, healthy breathing, healthy food and all that, with parents that knew what they were doing, then you have a perfect excuse to say, well, I don't know anything about the Atman or about the Vedanta yet, but I'm going to find out in the right way. But if you just trash the body and don't use it as the temple of God, as Jesus said, how are you going to expect to do any sadhana or even to hear the truth and understand it very well later on, even 20 years down the line? So this is just experience I'm talking about. It's not hearsay. I'm not making it up. Those are knots of the body to think about. The nerves, the physical nerves get blocked. Energy can't get to them, blood can't even get to them. The nutrients of food can't get to them. You get disease because of that. Your body organs fail. Your muscles constrict. You get old before your time and you get premature death. You think that's just, a line of descent? It's sort of its own, seven-road road to ruination, isn't it? In this case, 5. So let's not belabor that point. Let's go on to the life force. You're going a step inward now, and probably chakra-wise, you're probably thinking more like 2nd, 3rd chakra when you think of prana. Because when Vivekananda came here, he says, I see you Westerners, you don't know anything about prana, nor tanmatras. You don't know about the subtle elements in your mind, where the gross elements came from. They're actually thoughts. And you don't know about prana. So if you don't know about prana, man does not live by bread alone, you also don't know about psychic prana. There's a force that moves your thoughts. Well, we'll get to that, you see. But staying with the life force right now, dull thoughts happen because the prana is not on the rise. I like to say spiked. You have a flat line, and you have a dipped line, and you have a raised line, but you have this jagged line. See, when the prana is spiked like that, it's pretty much a restless lifetime you're living, like what's out here now. And you hear about some virus or something, and you get all fearful with that jagged prana. Your resistance against it is gone. You fear it. Fear is one of the results of jagged prana, spiked prana. So those thoughts are also, tamas, are also there. You run yourself ragged with restlessness, and then the next go-to move is to fall into dullness and depression. There's definitely a big knot in your life force. Maybe one of the major arteries is plugged in you. So, yes, breathe, but maybe at that point breathing's not going to be enough. You're going to have to hear with these ears what is good and spiritual. See with these eyes what is noble and uplifting. You're going to have to go to a teacher and get some help. And if you're not ready for the spiritual teacher yet, then you have to go to somebody who's more intelligent than our Western psychologists right now. You'd probably go to a yoga psychologist, because otherwise you're going to be steered towards medicines, elixirs, and so forth, and pills, and brooding, and let's examine this, in the wrong way, without God present. And that's not going to go anywhere deep. So I've told you before, I've taught this Vedanta. It's been my great boon to be able to teach this Vedanta everywhere. I've even gone into prisons in the West to teach this. So that's next. Dull thoughts give rise to impulsive action. A lot of the people I saw in these correctional institutions were fine people. They're almost like everyone else, most of them. And they had gotten there by some quick action that they regretted later. That's because they didn't have control of their prana. And you can blame some other, like, oh, my upbringing made me do it, or I'm innocent and the courts, called me guilty. And you'll have all sorts of excuses there, but when it really comes right down to it, your own prana did it. And if your own prana hadn't have had those spikes in it, you could have resisted the impulse to do violence. In any way, because the first Yama in yoga is nonviolence. That's why I mentioned Lord Buddha earlier days, that you're noble if you don't inflict violence. Krishna says so in the Gita too. You're already noble if you will not afflict the world for any reason, you see. Edison invents electricity. Westinghouse is a computer for that. New Jersey prison system goes to Edison can we use your electricity for the first electric chair? No, I'm not going to use the electricity to harm any living being. So that's one of the cases of our own American history back in the 1890s, you see, is that the first electric chair, that they started thinking that way as a punishment. They called it a more benign kind of punishment, electric chair. See? And so that's the reasoning they used, to use electricity for that purpose. You see, very interesting to think about. But since we're talking about prisons, that came to my mind. So this prana is really more at the source of things. You wouldn't have ended up facing the first electric chair, as that first murderer of his wife did back in the 1890s, if you had had your prana under control. So you have to be careful of knots in the life force, because you won't even be able to get to knots in your heart and mind if you don't. See? Most people don't even get to higher, deeper karmas that are associated with grantis unless they can open up the prana. What's next? Fluctuation of energy. Sometimes my energy is flowing, sometimes it's constricted. Sometimes it's going back and forth. See? But it's never even. Just like my breathing's never even. So they want you to breathe in, 8 counts, see? Hold, 8 counts, breathe out, 8 counts, because you forgot to breathe. So they're reteaching you how to neutralize or even out the breathing, because that's the doorway into your mind. Now, the seers don't need that doorway. They're coming from inside out. So they come into the body with their prana already under control. Their minds are already pure. So it's the mind that controls the prana, but for the practitioner, they have to get hold of the prana to get to the mind. So this is the disadvantage of a culture that doesn't teach you the Dharma when you grow up. But there you have the exemplars right there in front of you. Could be on a poster. Go ahead and follow through and see. That is, you could see that great teacher on a poster and go to him, and then maybe you'll start seeing the example of someone who came here to earth pure and perfect. Narendranath, the Lord of men, the perfect man. It's what Sri Ramakrishna called him, Swami Vivekananda. Then unsteadiness of nerves. And Father of Yoga, talks about that. I'm thinking that even, these diseases where, Alzheimer's and so forth, and various things that happen with people shaking, really start there. The nerves are shaking first, and they don't break that granti early on with practices. And so it reaches out to the body, and pretty soon the body's going like this. I mean, so maybe it's not even in your family or in your genes, but still you get it in the end. See, like MS, like my sister, you see, at the end. So this all happens from inside out. See? And you're coming outside in as a practitioner. So you work on these blockages in you. When people say, I want to improve myself, they're really saying, as far as Mother Kundalini is concerned, they're really saying, Mother, I want to break down grantis and open up my nadis. I want to uncoil my spring. Please come up from the first chakra and unfurl, you see, uncoil, and reach the higher chakras. Please, Mother, save me. Pahi mam, pahi mam. So unsteadiness of nerves, uneven breathing. There's even some ways that that has been put inside of music, which I want to make sure to include to give you that version of it. Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin, Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin, Taji Anyobo Kali Kali Bo Manabo Janamo Jadin, O tui taji anyobo, kali kali bo, manobo janamo jadin, shukir vashana karo arkadin, shukir vashana karo arkadin. Yakkan jeman pedirlikan, sheru peja beshedin. Yakkan jeman pedirlikan, sheru peja beshedin. Taji anyobo, kali kali bo, amombo janomo dadin, shukir vashana karo arkadin, shukir vashana karo arkadin. And verses like that, which roll on in a kind of cautionary teaching to Kamalakanta's mind, the singer of this song. He says, how long will you cling to this empty life, searching after earthly happiness alone? And why don't you give up these vain thoughts? In other words, break down these grantis, idle talk, and for the rest of the days that are left to you, chant Kali, Kali, Kali. It's like ask Mother to come up and help you, assist you, breaking down these knots in consciousness. Because he says, otherwise, misery and misfortune will come to you if you do not chant this name of Kali, and if you don't practice these systems. But even if misery comes, just remember the Mother, and also remember the 9 months and 9 days of suffering in your mother's womb that you went through, that you've forgotten now. And might as well throw in there the past lifetime that got you here in a body with constricted channels, you see, where I'm eating bad food. Why should I be doing that? Where I'm not breathing. Why should I be doing that? Where I'm not thinking, my thoughts are dull. Why should I be doing that? And can I just swiftly, with Mother's sword, destroy those in one day? Is it going to take me a whole lifetime to do that? So he asks himself these various questions. And as I think we're probably running low on time here in this first half, we have looked at the fourth of these knots of life force. So let's end this half with uneven breathing, because I've already said plenty about that. So that's one of the things which you can do, actually quite simple, but I would say for the practice of pranayama, it can unhinge the mind. It can cause a little screw to go loose in there. People have gone rather crazy doing too much pranayama, thinking that that's the end-all and be-all of a practice. But a sort of more gentler pranayama under the guidance of a teacher for a certain amount of months will put everything right again, along with your good food habits, which in the West probably take you more like, I'd say, a year or two to put this boat right again, and change your system to a system that can live on less, a system that burns purer fuel, and more sattvic fuel. Some of these teachings even the great souls will mention a little bit, like Krishna mentioning it about the gunas of food in the Bhagavad Gita, and what to eat, what not to eat, and so forth. He addresses that pretty nicely. Gita being a incomparable scripture to study that anyone can really understand, but it's nevertheless very profound. It goes deep without leaving the mind behind in esoteric philosophy and so forth. So these have been this first half, as we looked at the Kundalini system first. Now we've looked at the knots in the body and knots in the life force, and I ask you to connect those two now at the break as you think about this. And then we'll, and also leave a nadi open. You see, leave some space open in your mind to go to the emotional knots that are caused by these two, and then into the knots of the mind, which really get to more of the essence of the teaching. Because if you can purify the mind the pure mind is coveted by illumined souls. They want to see that in their students, aspirants, pupils, and sadhakas who are doing practice. So here I think is a good time for us to break. Please, in 15 minutes, join us again for this very important teaching on Kundalini Yoga and how we can open up the Ajna Chakra or the Jnana Chakshu in this very lifetime and benefit from it.
Kula Kundalini Goma Banda Kahe Redi Grandi Vidarana Kara Kahe Mama Manasha Chanchala Ratra Dine Guru Devadaya Karadina Jane Jaya Sadguru Ishvara Prabha Kahe Bhavaroga Vikara Vina Shaka He Mana Jena Rahitava Shri Charane Guru Devadaya Karadina Jane Guru Devadaya Karadina Jane